Hello and welcome to Lean In Leander. I'm your host, Andrew Naudine, and I had the chance to sit down with this gentleman today, a gentleman by the name of Alex Tynberg. For those of you who don't know who Alex is the owner and developer of the Northline project here in Leander, Texas. This project is going to make a huge difference in our city, and it's the first major urban center to be developed out here in Leander. We talk about how that came about, a few intricacies of the deal itself, and you get to know a little bit about Alex. He's a really interesting character and a genuinely nice guy. I appreciated him spending some time with me today, and thank him for that as well. So by the end of the conversation, we were able to call each other buddy, and that's what I'm always striving for here on Lean In. We want to introduce you to the people who are making a difference in our community, and Alex is definitely one of those folks. So sit back, listen here on the podcast, or if you're watching the video on Facebook or YouTube, take a couple of minutes, grab a drink, and sit back, and we're going to give you a little bit of information about the Northline project. I hope you'll enjoy what we have to talk about. Welcome to this episode of Lean In Leander. I'm your host, Andrew Naudine, and today I'm with Alex Tynberg, who is the owner and developer of the Northline project in Leander. And we've met at one of the offices that he offices from today, and we're outside. It's a beautiful sunshiny day, so we're going to go ahead and take off the masks and have a little bit of a conversation as it relates to that Northline development. So Alex, thank you for joining me here today. I appreciate your time.
Andrew, thank you for the opportunity to be a part of your podcast. I'm really excited to be a part of it.
Well, that makes two of us. So, Alex, you just so that you know, you're my first non-acquainted, non-friendly interview. You're the first person that I've interviewed on Lean In Leander that I'm not well acquainted with. So, again, I appreciate you taking some time and hopefully answering some questions for the listeners and the viewers out there.
Well, let's change that non-friend and let's get acquainted.
Absolutely.
And I look forward to
got the business card now, so I know how to get to the bat channel. So again, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. So to get started, I have a little bit of background on you, I believe, and we're not going to make too much of a big deal out of this, but I always like to point out where people are from. You're originally from California, and you've been working in the state of Texas, let's say, for about 15 years now, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Moved to Austin 15 years ago and started working in Austin and doing some downtown development work in Austin in the urban core.
Okay.
Mixed use development back in 2006. And
anything notable there? Something that people might be familiar with?
Worked on the 360 condominium tower back in 06, which was the tallest building in Austin at the time. It's been eclipsed by a couple buildings since then, but a great way to cut my teeth in the development world in Texas, and from that point did a variety of development type activities in both Central Texas and in North Texas in the Dallas-Fort Worth region.
Okay.
And 4 years ago decided to focus on projects more locally.
Okay.
And that's when I sort of discovered Leander from a project perspective, and have been working on the Northline project since 2016.
2016. So from that perspective, you've dealt with, what is that, at least two different city managers during that period of time, right?
Yes. We are, there was an initial city manager, then there was an interim city manager, and now we have a third city manager.
Okay.
That's
okay.
Right.
So some changes and some challenges during that process from 16 to 20, I would say.
Yeah.
Not even counting COVID in it, because I'm sure that was challenging enough as it is.
Yeah.
What was the receptiveness in the city of Leander, just in general? I mean, we don't need to do granular details on that.
Well, back in 16, it was a completely different group of staff and council at that time, and the way I guess I could best describe it is the city was really waiting for a development of a significant scale to happen in the TOD.
Okay.
the TOD had been in place with a TERS district, really focused on the hopes of having an urban development happen close to the Capital Metro Rail station, and we had really Austin Community College come in as the first driver to that process. I think they bought their land in 12.
Okay.
And finally built their first, building a number of years later, finishing, I think, in 17. And then St. David's came along. They actually had purchased their land when I was looking at, they were in the process, of purchasing their land when I was looking at the opportunity back in 16.
Okay.
And they were a big driver for me purchasing my first section of the 115-acre development. It was a 23-acre purchase, knowing that St. David's was coming in across the street. And then I ended up doing three separate transactions to assemble the full 115 acres. But at the time, the city was sort of waiting on projects. There was, I'll take it back, there was a multifamily project that did go in prior to Austin Community College, which was really the first project, but it wasn't a commercial project. And I know that commercial development has really been the big hope and expectation for what goes on in the TOD.
Sure.
And so when I came into the picture in 16 and bought that first 23 acres, I started collaborating with the city and asking, what are the hopes and expectations and goals for this area, and they really wanted a downtown development. They wanted a core development, and so I went through the process of finding those other two transactions and working with those two other landowners in different sort of time frames, but went back to the city as that process was kind of underway and talked to the council members and talked to the city manager and the planning department. What would you like this to look like, and how can I put together a project that meets your vision? And that's really how it unfolded.
So for the audience, just because I'm familiar with some of the terms you've been throwing out there, but let's talk about TOD. What does that mean?
It's a transit-oriented development.
Okay.
So the idea is that it's really an urban or a dense development that happens around a transit node. So in this case, the transit node is the Capital Metro
is the rail
transit station,
okay,
and the bus that services that come out of that transit depot.
So when we're looking at that in Leander, and as a resident, I drive by there regularly, and I see, I know where ACC is, and I know where the hospital is now, and I guess it's what's the street there? San Gabriel?
San Gabriel Parkway.
Yeah, San Gabriel. Okay, so San Gabriel's there. So from the Northline development, to give people a little bit more of a visual, let's paint it out for them.
Yeah.
What does that look like? If I'm at the train station, if I walk across that parking lot, am I going to start walking onto the Northline development after that?
You need to actually walk across the Metro Drive bridge, which was recently completed by the city.
Okay.
And on the north side of that bridge, you're going to walk right into Northline.
Okay, so that gives people some perspective of what this looks like. And then, of course, 115 acres is really hard for most people to kind of like, okay, what did I imagine that looks like? So are we looking at something that would go all the way to 183?
Yeah.
Okay, and then on the other side with the hospital, there's development beyond the hospital? Is that the scope, or is it up to that line?
It's up to so the northern boundary is San Gabriel Parkway, which is right across the street from St. David's to the south.
Okay.
And then it's the eastern boundary is the 183A tollway.
Okay.
Which, by the way, they're about to expand 6.6 miles.
Yeah.
Starting over the summer.
Got to make more money on tolls,
Yeah. Got to do what they got to do. And then the western boundary is the railroad tracks.
Okay.
You could call it 183, but it's really the railroad tracks, which along 183. And then the southern boundary is Austin Community College on the eastern side, and then we actually jog down a little bit on the western side of Main Street, and then it's really the creek is the boundary on the southwest. which is really on the other side, the northern side of the creek from the parking lot that you just mentioned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that should help people get a little bit more visually oriented with what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the explanation. Definitely helping people understand how long this has taken to really come to fruition. Because there's a lot of conversation that takes place in the city of Leander that centers around development and diversifying our tax base, which are really, really important issues. I don't want to make light of them, and I'm not trying to lessen the importance of that. But most people are not necessarily, again, they're not keyed into some of the specifics of how that necessarily works. So what I wanted to kind of try to help accomplish today is give people a better idea of exactly what this means, what it will do for the city, and how it'll impact the city in the long run. I'm fond of talking about these things, not for me now, but for me 10 years from now. What does this look like 10 years from now, 15 years from now? And we start to talk about the infrastructure and things of that nature when you start to think that way, a little bit more holistically, a little bit more long term. So you as a developer have more knowledge when it comes to those types of issues. And I wasn't really going to necessarily talk about this, and I don't want to belabor the point, okay? But we obviously just went through this big winter wonderland that we had last week, and there were issues with the water infrastructure. I don't want to get granular. I don't want to get into the specifics there. That's for another episode with another guest. But from your perspective as a developer, and you see that process, and you see what happened, and where potentially there were some mistakes made and maybe some things not done right. Does that concern you moving forward? Is that something that you would come back to say, hey, Leander, we need to talk about this because I don't know that you guys are necessarily set up to do this right? Or is it something that you handle as a developer?
Well, when you're talking about municipal utility supply, and that'll cover from a municipal standpoint, water and wastewater, sewer issues, those sorts of things, drainage. You coordinate with the city to address those. You've got gas and electric, which are not city, but they're provided for from a public entity basis. One of the reasons I chose Leander is because of the planning that the city had done to provide infrastructure for the future. You go to a place like Cedar Park, and that community is relatively built out. Leander is less than 50% built out. They have secured rights for their water, secured infrastructure for the development that will happen in that city for the next 25, 30 years. That was a big driver to select that location for a long-term project like Northline. Now, when it comes to how the city approves development and how its resources get applied, one, that's a city issue, which I'm a private developer, so that's not my bailiwick. But what I will say is the most efficient way to develop is through density. That is where you get your bang from everything, and that's probably one of the areas you want to talk about is, how will Northline help diversify the tax base? I mean, the city hired a third-party organization called Urban 3 to present to City Council in 2018 before the entitlements for Northline and the development agreement for Northline were approved, and the presentation that they provided, which is super fascinating, shows how the Leander revenues from property tax, and obviously sales tax is another big piece of this, but the presentation was really driven around property tax. It shows in a 3D model how Northline will create this incredible value per acre with the density compared to anywhere else in the city, compared to the other nodes in Williamson County, and also it provided a visual on how you compare to the other Cap Metro rail stops along the rail. And it shows this incredible 3D version of density that Northline will create for the city compared to for other Williamson County nodes such as Georgetown and Cedar Park, and what that's showing is the per acre value in that one piece of property, and how it's going to generate surplus income, surplus revenue that'll support the rest of the city. Now, if you look at the city of Austin, their downtown supports the rest of the city.
Right.
And that's the whole basis behind this, is you're creating this dense urban core for the city, which is diversifying the tax base and giving the city positive surplus revenue from that development that'll support other components of the city that don't create positive revenue for the city.
So the project as it stands now, and I know that they've already started work out there, and they're digging holes, and I see backhoes and all that kind of stuff out there. So is the vision of what Northline looks like now and going forward, is that the same vision that was espoused like at the early part, 2016? So this is something that people have always kind of like, this is what we want it to look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. In 2016, I wasn't clear what I was doing with the project. I was buying 23 acres.
Okay.
And as I met with the city and learned more about what their vision was, I then bought into what this downtown urban core could become.
Okay.
So really it was 2017 before I formalized the plan for Northline. But once I formalized that plan in 17, nothing's changed. In fact, I would say with bringing on some of the partners I brought on, my vertical development partners, that we've become a bit more slanted towards a commercial office development. We're planning more for significant Class A, corporate relocation. Potential for Northline.
That's a great segue to my next question, because it's one of the things that we've talked about, and I'm on a couple of different committees in the city of Leander. One of those was an economic development committee that I worked with the chamber. And some of the conversations that we had regularly revolved around that Class A type of infrastructure and the lack of it in Leander.
There really isn't any.
There isn't, right? So when I look at that, I look downtown Austin and I see, Alphabet and the Google building and who else is in down? Indeed, and you can go to Capital Factory. They're just big places. But those people live in Leander.
They sure do.
So I always look at that and I say, you know what? If we had a way, and I've always thought this is what we should do, and I'm so glad that you're moving that direction, or at least, kind of thinking that way, because I look at it, and especially now after COVID, where people have kind of changed their perspective of what the work life looks like, it seems to me logical that you would have your big offices downtown and a place where you could work Monday through Friday, with the exception of the meetings and stuff like that, they would be closer to your house.
It's what's called hub and spoke, and it's an office term that we believe, and I figure at some point during this interview or this discussion you're gonna say, what has COVID done for Northline? We feel that Northline is going to come out of COVID a lot stronger than if COVID never existed, because of the very point you just made. Is suburban office is going to explode. And we feel we are going to be very well positioned.
I would agree with you 100%. And again, we have this advantage over every other community up north of Austin.
Yes, we do.
With the rail. It's so logical that, there's an easy way. I mean, hey, if I have to drive to work and I'm working in Northline, great. But if I have to get down to the office, I hop a train and I go to the office. Which I think makes perfect sense. And, I've been in Chicago and I've seen the way that public transport works in Chicago, and it's brilliant. I mean, I go to Chicago. My daughter lives up there. I go regularly, and I think I've rented a car once. I've just never needed one. I've never needed one. And although you can't necessarily say the same thing about Leander, the fact that you would be able to, and this is, again, envisioning, I have a business meeting at one of the, what do you call it, a hub spoke? Or
hub and spoke.
Hub and spoke? Yeah. Okay, so I'm with Google. I have a meeting, and it happens to be at one of the hub and spoke offices in Leander.
Yeah.
In the future, I will be able to land at the Austin airport, ride a train into Austin, switch, ride a train to Leander, go to my meeting, maybe stay at a hotel in Leander if I want to.
At Northline.
At Northline.
Yeah.
And then, the next day go back, or 2 days from then, or whatever the case might be. So, from my perspective, that's why I say that 10-year vision.
Yeah.
I always look at what this is going to look like, and I think it's absolutely fantastic the way that's going. So you touched on COVID for a minute, and I had a conversation with Chris Sersnick, who he works with. Can't remember the name of the company that he works with right now, but anyway, Chris was telling me about disruptions in supply lines and things of that nature. Yeah. And I know you're not necessarily that far along yet, but is that impacting your deliverable date, for lack of better terms?
Not so much at this point.
Okay.
We hope that there certainly have been price escalation in lumber and some of the areas of Councilmember Cernick's world of,
and it's Coventry Homes.
Coventry,
just came to me
of single family development, but we've heard steel pricing and across the board. There's fluctuation going on with COVID impact. That's going to ebb and flow, but as it relates to the timing of the project. We've been very fortunate that we had our groundbreaking event at the beginning of March last year, almost a year ago, and it was before the whole COVID announcement came about, and so we've been blowing and going since then, and we'll be at a year anniversary of construction coming up in about 2 weeks. We have about a 2-year horizontal infrastructure timeline.
Okay.
However, throughout that timeline, we'll be at certain points in the project where we're gonna go vertical.
Okay.
And so the reason it's 2 years is we're starting from the core, and we're building out as we have things lined up, and so that core phases of the core are actually finished now.
Okay.
We are this between now and a year from now. We've got 5 key product types that we are hoping and expecting will all come out of the ground during that time frame.
So we should start to see buildings come up.
We will start to see buildings come up, and so we've got traditional office, this Class A office that we've talked about. We've got retail, we've got medical office, and then we've got 2 classes of residential. We've got multifamily, and then we have attached townhome, which is going to be 4-story attached townhome, so fairly dense townhome. So all of those product types over the next 12 months, we expect are all going to be coming out of the ground.
Cool. Well, that'll be good. I think it'll give people in the city a sense of the development at that point, because you really can't tell right now. It's really hard to tell. Yeah. And you have to be keyed into some of the things that we've talked about that, okay, I can see that. And I'm no expert. I did stay at a Holiday Inn a couple of weeks ago, so, maybe that helped. But anyway, so on the Class A space, we talked about the positive impact to the tax base and things of that nature. When we start to talk about occupancy and filling those buildings, is there, and obviously COVID has changed this a little bit, but I think we're both on the same page when I say that I believe that there's pressure there that will help with the occupancy, to drive occupancy rates in Class A for sure. Are there any businesses, either in the Class A space or retail, that are currently in Leander that you would look at and say, I'd love to have them in Northline?
Absolutely. I think there's across the board. You have businesses that are in whatever space they're in and want to, frankly, upgrade to the building stature that we're bringing into Northline. I mean, we intend for Northline to be an extraordinarily unique project in the region. We are planning this project with the types of enhancements and the type of quality that go well above and beyond the Leander, baseline of zoning requirements.
Okay.
And so we anticipate this to be a very, very unique town center development for the region and a destination for the region.
There's been some conversation, I don't mean to interrupt you there, but there's been some conversation I know centered around relocating city offices and things of that nature. Is that still something that's on the board?
Absolutely.
Is that going to happen? What's that look like?
Well, it's certainly, I would say, on the board. We have a full block that we've laid aside in an ideal location for City Hall and associated civic buildings. I've had extensive conversations with the city about that, and so it's really up to the city to get to that point where they're ready to make that jump. I know that over the past year or so they've been working on their future planning exercise, and it's a department by department exercise to determine their future needs, and I mean they're going to be very quickly exceeding their capacity in their current location. There's definitely an old town. There's a love of what's going on in Old Town and a huge need to keep Old Town special, and so I think all of that can be done in the context of when the city's ready to relocate, to keep Old Town in a unique, really wonderfully complementary aspect to what's going on around it.
Yeah, no, I would 100% agree with that as well. I've been involved a little bit tertiary, but a little bit on the Old Town project.
Yeah.
And when we did surveys a couple of years ago, and we talked to people about what do you want to see out of Old Town, it was really interesting to some of the feedback that we got. A lot of we need more restaurants, we need that kind of stuff, and it's ideal for that type of stuff.
It is.
Then you add in the Smooth Village piece, and Old Town starts to become a very unique, kind of almost an echo, I would say, of what Austin used to be like. I think that would be really interesting to do out there, and culturally I think would be very well embraced. I think personally, that's my opinion. But
I think the idea is that Northline and Old Town both offer really complementary experiences, and both remain unique and special to the city, and so I'm looking forward to watching both of them grow and develop in that.
As am I. So we talked a little bit about what you're bringing in, and I know that there's been some presentations. I think it was, maybe a couple of months ago that you came, I think it was you came to the council and you talked about the hub.
Yeah, and I was just at the council a couple of weeks ago as well. But the hub is our first initial retail anchor that we've announced, and that's going to be very special. That's going to be a real game-changing kind of destinational retail anchor that is going to be super unique to not just Leander but the region. Just as a snapshot, it's a lawn centerpiece that's got picnic tables and lawn chairs. It's an artificial lawn that is programmed literally 7 days a week with activities. It's buttressed on one end by a stage and a big jumbotron TV, so they have movies, and they have concerts, and they have events that happen on the stage. Around this kind of public amenity is a series of restaurants and bars, and so you've got this incredible one-stop shop for people that want a variety of food and beverage and entertainment all in one special location, really.
I'm from Houston, and the city center in Houston is something that I think of right away. And I also know in Oklahoma City there's something very similar to that, although a little bit more towards the Old Town kind of concept in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
But they built it from scratch. It did not exist. This is something that they, if I remember correctly, they put up from scratch. So I thought the hub project was really, really interesting. And again, I want to make sure that there are businesses, because I'm a big proponent of supporting small business, and I want to make sure that I get the message across that there are opportunities if you have a small business in Leander. I'm assuming maybe to be part of the hub.
Absolutely, no, absolutely.
Okay.
There's going to be spaces within the hub for local restaurants. There's going to be spaces in the adjacent, Class A 100,000 square foot office building that's going to have retail on the ground floor. That all is going to be leased to local or regional businesses. We're really focused on food and beverage, so absolutely. You're going to have office locations where local businesses can relocate and come to Northline. I mean, we're going to have not only corporate relocation options for campuses for certain companies that want to go that route, but we're going to have your run-of-the-mill 100,000 square foot office building that needs to lease to a variety of tenants.
Now, when it comes to filling those spaces, and again, I'm trying to make sure that I'm covering it in the scope of this episode, but when it comes to getting into one of those spaces and being part of that project, would that be something, do you replicate Northline somewhere else? So like if I'm a restaurateur, and I come into the hub and I'm finding great success in the hub in Leander, is that something that you scale and replicate somewhere else? I mean, you're a builder. Do you do that somewhere else? Similar project, and take that tenant now franchising out to a different location?
Are you asking if I am moving on to another project?
No. What I'm asking is that when you finish Northline,
yes,
if you have an opportunity to replicate that project or something similar to that, is that hub completely separate from what you do? Is that there's someone you bring in, or are you involved with that? How does that work?
Well, I guess the first way I wanted to answer your question is when Northline's fully built out, I'm probably at the point where my career is done.
Ready to retire.
I'm gonna be in my 60s, in my mid 60s, right, and that's probably where I'm headed.
So, however, the penthouse is already set aside for you then, right? In Northline.
My point is that this is everything I do, and this is all my energy is put towards this project, and it's going to be another 12 plus years before it's done.
Okay.
But to answer your question, the hub is a concept that's on in one location right now in Florida.
Okay.
It's near Seaside. It's on what's called 30A, which is this kind of picturesque, scenic section of Florida, which is a huge vacation area. And so the hub has been in existence for about 4 or 5 years there, and has been a raving success in that area. And the founder is looking to expand this great concept, and really he's focused on Texas right now. In fact, they're relocating their headquarters here to Austin.
Oh, wow.
And
they should relocate to the Northline in.
They may end up relocating their office to at some point down the road. They are working on 2 deals in North Dallas. From a demographic standpoint, the North Dallas Collin County and Williamson County regions are extraordinarily unique to this country at this point in time. Those demographics are phenomenal for a concept such as the hub, and really for growth in general. And so the focus is on these areas where the hub is going to expand to, and I don't know how much bigger that entity is going to get.
Right. But
we're partnering with them to come to Leander because of Leander's special opportunity.
No, I think these are the types of questions that I think of, and when I occasionally will sit down and chat with somebody, they those questions kind of bubble up to the top every once in a while. So I just kind of wanted to make sure that from my perspective, and with the episode today, that we did touch on a few of those things and kind of let people know that there are opportunities.
Absolutely.
In Northline.
Absolutely.
That there's going to be, and then now I remember where I was going to go with that, and I'll end on this. How actively are you pursuing businesses? Because I know in certain other instances, and I'm using this as an example, I'm not keying anything up here, okay, just to make sure people understand. Like a city manager will typically go out and try to bring businesses into a city. So do you have something similar at Northline where you're trying to bring in tenants?
Yes, and we're working very closely with the city manager and the economic development department with the city, hand in hand. So maybe it's helpful to kind of share sort of how Northline's getting built out. So I'm the master developer, but I have very important sort of best-in-class development partners that I've carefully selected for the project. Now, I think the most important one is our commercial development partner, and that's Lincoln Property Company.
Okay.
So Lincoln has probably 70 offices across the country. They've got a global reach. They have 6,000 commercial employees. They are bringing people from coast to coast to these opportunities, and that's why I picked them versus other large commercial development companies that otherwise would have been potential options for this project. Lincoln was my first choice. I've got two residential development partners who are best in class, Slate Real Estate Partners for multifamily, and Novak Brothers out of Georgetown for the townhomes, and they do these incredible brownstones in Georgetown. They've won Texas Builder of the Year. They're going to replicate that in a different in our own Northline way,
right?
Which is we've got a unique architectural twist to things. It's it's contemporary, but with this nod towards a traditional hill country vernacular.
Okay.
And so really excited about what things are going to look like. They're going to be very different than a place like the Domain. We just have our own. We have our own style. We definitely have our own Leander feel. Frankly,
I think that's important. I'm glad you made that point, because a lot of times people will say, "Hey, we need a domain over here," and I'm like, "Yeah, the Domain works because of where it is, and it's the Domain. I mean, it's a different beast."
That's right.
So I think it's great to know, and I hope the listeners can appreciate the fact that this is something very unique for Leander.
Thank you for hearing that, and we've been very thoughtful about that, and we've been spent a lot of time with our design experts to put together a 300-page architectural guideline document to make sure that we're doing things the way we want to do them in this special way. But to get to your question, so
Thanks for remembering.
The actual leasing is being done by my partners.
Okay.
And so our website, anybody can go to our website and get updates on the project. It's www.northlineleander.com. We've got Instagram and Facebook at Northline Leander as well. People can sign up and get updates, and in our PR and marketing firm have managed that process and do a wonderful job. They're sitting here as well. But we have Lincoln developing the commercial. We have Weitzman, who's a local retail brokerage company, brokering the retail. So they'd be who would be contacted for retail opportunities. Lincoln does their own office brokerage. We have Stream Realty brokering the medical office for Lincoln. So we've got a host of sort of factions doing their own roles to lease and procure. Now Lincoln on a global scale is working to bring opportunities to the project. They are the largest developer of commercial office in the city of Austin right now.
Okay.
And so their pitch to businesses is super compelling, coming from the both coasts. Hey, put your main office, because most of these relocations want to be in Austin. Put your main office in downtown, and put your spoke office. Put your hub in downtown. Put your spoke office in Northline.
That's fantastic.
And that's the message that they've been very excited to deliver throughout the marketing process.
Now, having been involved in a couple of those projects myself, just from the other side of it, like business-wise, looking at where we want to put our business, that type of thing. That's a unique pitch for sure, and I think it's timely. And again, going back to what we said a little bit earlier, I think that's something that'll benefit Leander to a great degree.
Yeah.
Well, Alex, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. I hope we haven't gone too long today, but we get to talking, and that's the whole point of Lean In Leander, is a conversation. We want to surface up some of these things so that people can learn a little bit more than what they might get off of the other little short snippets that you see here and there in the other place. We're going to include all of the websites, hopefully. I'll get with Alex to make sure I don't leave anybody out, but we're going to include all that information with today's episode, and you'll be able to reach out to those people yourselves, Leander, find out more about the project and find out more about those leasing opportunities. This is a fabulous opportunity for you to, as Alex said, upgrade, or maybe relocate, or maybe just start your business. It really, at this point, this is going to be such an engine for what is going to happen going forward in Leander. I'm super excited about it. I really appreciate you taking the time. Your care and your vision shows just in this conversation here. I know that you're really, really invested in this.
Yes.
And
in a lot of ways.
It shows. It shows. And I know that for you, hey, I'm always real frank. It's business, and there's profit. But that's part of the equation, not the whole equation.
Well, hopefully someday there'll be profit. But I'll tell you, there's a lot of passion. And
and that shows.
The city of Leander deserves an incredible project, and I'm working as hard as I can to deliver that for the citizens.
As a citizen, I thank you. And again, as the host, I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Tune in next time. Lean In Leander. We'll see you then.